Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Not Morning People, a show where my friend Chris, Laura, and myself talk about life, technology, and share stories. Today's topic is why we create. But first, let's get started with some introductions. Chris?
Hello, I'm Chris. I'm a writer, editor, and wannabe oil painter in the Carl, North Carolina area.
Laura?
Hi, I'm Laura. I am a taxonomist, a knitter, a cook, a writer, and a voracious reader. And I live on Staten Island, New York.
And my name is Nick, and I am a father, a software developer, a maker, and someone who just loves to learn. All right. So first off, we always start with what are you reading? And I will start because it's slightly embarrassing that at this moment I am not actively reading a book. I have 2 books. I do have to say though, my brain just fired. So I have 2 books that I am looking to start, and one of which is How to Talk About Anything or How to Talk About Difficult Things by the NPR host, and I'm blanking on her name. So clearly I'm as prepared as I should be for this show. But it's she's the host of Death, Sex, and Money, and it's a very good podcast and or a very good radio show / podcast. I just think it'd be an interesting read. So that's mine.
Wait, this is the one, How to Talk to Anybody About Anything, Breaking the Ice with Everyone. Is that the one?
No, I don't
Oh,
believe so.
I just did a Google search. NPR.
But that's okay. Yeah, I'll look it up while you guys talk. All right, Laura,
Put it
why
in the
don't you go
comments.
next? Yes.
It's Anna Sale.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah, I'm still reading. I had planned on really tearing through this, and life got in the way. But I'm reading Fleischman is in Trouble, and I'm enjoying it a great deal.
Cool. I'm still reading, I think I talked about last time, that show Exterminate All the Brutes, and so I'm still reading this complete Joseph Conrad short stories. I meant to read just the one that he referenced in the or that they referenced in the show, but I kind of got sucked in, so I'm reading all about colonial douchebags doing bad things all over Africa and elsewhere.
So, yeah.
So my wife did save me. It's Let's Talk About Hard Things by Anna Sale.
Ooh, let's talk about hard things. Okay, I'm gonna look that up.
All right, what are you looking forward to this week? Let's go in reverse order. So, Chris.
Oh wait, I'm first.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about this one.
That's all right. Laura, you want to go?
I could just go simple. Like I have my kids this weekend, and so it's always a joy to have my kids. My oldest one is going to be leaving for college in Rochester, New York, in I don't know, like 3 or 4 weeks. And so that will be the first like kid leaving the nest completely. So every day between now and when they like go off into the world is like feels like borrowed time. So I'm just trying to enjoy every second that I get.
Well, if you're driving up and therefore driving back, let us know and let's meet up.
Yeah.
Oh, my ex is taking him up, but I will definitely.
I'm sure at some point you'll want to visit.
Up the next time I'm in New York for sure.
All right, Laura, what are you looking forward to?
I guess my anticipations are simple. I'm getting a haircut on Saturday. I am really looking forward to that because I'm getting shaggy. And apart from that, I have a really busy couple of weeks coming up. The Olympics are on, and so I'm looking forward to making the ensuing work that I have to do because I'm in advertising, and the Olympics are a big advertising deal. I'm looking forward to the interstitial moments, which usually leads to me finding something else I really like or want to do. So I'm looking forward to that. And then finally, I am looking forward to the new season of Ted Lasso, which starts on Friday.
What is that show about? I've heard about it, but I've never watched it.
Oh, so good. And you know, if you are binging the first season, you can get through it like in a night. It is about a football coach from Kansas City, transplanted into London, coaching a Premier League football/soccer team where he doesn't know the rules, he doesn't know anything. He's brought in by the ex-wife of the former owner who got the team in the divorce, and she hates her ex-husband so much that she wants to destroy the team because this is her first hire in an attempt to run the team into the ground. But it does not turn out like you think it will.
Is it anything like the movie Major League? Because that's I'm getting those vibes.
No, it is actually not even so much about the game itself and the players' talents and whatnot. It is much more about what you would think of as the coaching sort of soft skills, like developing these guys as people, and Ted's own development, because he himself isn't coming from a great situation, which is why he took the job. And then there's just so many lovely comedic moments. The cast is amazing. Brendan Hunt is just a treasure. And Juno Temple is amazing, and Hannah Waddingham is amazing. I mean, they're just it's an ensemble cast, and it's fantastic.
Great.
There was a Twitter thread the other day about somebody was like, "What is your favorite television show of all time?" And I just clicked on it and scrolled down a little bit, and the top 20 people all said Friday Night Lights, which is another football centered show that I have only watched one episode of, and I'm like, I wonder why people like that show so much. I don't know why that popped to mind when you said that it was about football coach.
Sports dramas, sports comedies, etc.
Yeah.
But it's not sports. I mean, if you're not into sports at all, it doesn't matter. It's just wonderful.
Well, sports is a great mechanism to create drama without actually creating drama, because every game is going to have a winner and loser. So you can have this life or death situation that there is no death. So you can continually have that sort of drama.
Yep. Exactly.
While we were recommending shows, I was just going to say that I was almost done binging all 4 seasons of Insecure on HBO. And that's really, really good. It's one of probably my favorite shows I've watched over the last couple of years.
Now, is that a comedy or?
Yeah, I mean it's Issa Rae is the main star, and so I would say it's a what's the opposite of a dramedy, but where a comedy comes first? Comeda?
Right.
Comema?
Situational comedy? Sitcom?
No.
So it's one of those shows where there's a lot of laughs, but it's also where you're following characters and they're developing characters, and it's about relationships and making mistakes and Black culture and all these things. So it's just a really great show.
And what is it on?
HBO.
Oh. Yeah. That's the one I don't have.
It's that's the one service that I subscribe to right now, just because I somebody's check out this show and check out this show, and I logged on there. I'm like, oh my god, there's 14 things on here I want to see, so I'm going to keep it around for a little while.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
No, HBO is great content. I don't watch enough. I don't watch enough shows to make it worth it and validate, even though I probably would enjoy all of them. Oh, all right.
I guess I'm very fickle. I come and go as the shows do.
as is okay. So I'm looking forward to actually getting recertified in CPR tonight. So my
Ooh.
certification, I believe, lapsed like a month ago. So it was time for me to get it renewed anyway. But it's been something I put off for way too long, was getting certified in the first place. And I'm going to hopefully ask to do an additional training course and get my whole Rotary Club CPR certified, or at least anyone who wants to, because I think we need more people who have that skill.
Absolutely.
Why am I just am not surprised to hear this at all. Like when I think of somebody who like, you know, it, like the one of the last scenes of Groundhog Day, when he's kind of like gotten all of his shit together and he spends the whole day like saving the whole town. That catches the kid from falling out of the tree, and then he runs and like gives
Right.
the Heimlich to a guy to get the chunk of meat out of his throat, and then he helps the women with their flat tire and whatever. Like when I imagine Nick, I imagine a guy with like a lifesaver board and a fire extinguisher and like all the things to like save the world. Is that a bad image? I feel like that's a good image.
I think it's a bit extreme, but I'll take it. It could be a lot worse.
You just seem like one of the most generous, like positive towards the world thinking people that I know. So there you have it.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. Community minded.
Yes, that too.
I'll take that. Well, on that's actually a good segue. So our topic today is, why do we create? So we all do creative things. So I'd like for each of us to talk a little bit about the types of things we create, and what is our driving factor behind that? Because Laura, I have a feeling there's a very different reason as to why you knit versus why you write versus why you do the other creative activities you do. So does anyone want to start us off?
That is true. I can talk about the writing. It's evolved over time, right? So the reasons I do it now are very different from the reasons I started doing it when I was, much younger. When I was a kid, I was doing it because my little town was, so tiny and isolated. It was pretty much the only way I was going to get away from, the small-mindedness and the bigotry and, all of the things that go along with growing up in an isolated small town in the middle of nowhere. So it was an escape for me. And then when I got to college and, I was rewarded for it, it was kind of like, oh, wow, this is my ticket into the world. Which is, of course, why I moved to New York. And then once I got here and amongst, professional writers of all sorts, I went quiet for a while, and then it kind of resurfaced, and it was a way. It was more in the nonfiction vein. It was a way for me to make sense of the world I was in, and that's kind of where I'm at now, writing wise. Knitting wise, it's my grandmother taught me how to do it, and it's just it's a way not to be antsy, but it's also, it's very meditative. So the process of knitting is one I really enjoy. And for me, it's not even so much about the end product, but it's really nice to get something out of that.
Yes. Now you published. Would you call it a short? How would you classify your and I apologize. It's been a very long time since I have read it. I believe it's fiction, but it's realistic fiction based. So tell us, I guess, a little bit about that book. And I'm saying I'm being very non-specific because I believe you've published other things, and I can't just say that one book you published. And
yes, no.
Laura's done it all.
And that was no. That was actually my my undergraduate thesis, my senior thesis. I wrote that while I was in college, and it was about my little town. It was a collection of short stories, and then years later, I was at Bowker, and we were launching a program for self-published authors. And I was like, well, I have this material, you know, and let me add a few things to it. So, you know, when after I graduated, I kept writing about this town, so I had more stories to add to it. And I ran it, you know, essentially through the self-publishing mill, and, you know, came out with a book. So that's how that came to be. I just wanted to basically road test the services that we were offering to other authors. And then, you know, along the way in my life, I've published plenty of nonfiction. I used to have a column in Publishers Weekly, and I contributed a chapter to an O'Reilly book called Book the Futurist Manifesto. I've written a lot about metadata, which is what my, you know, career's been about. So all kinds of writing for all kinds of reasons.
And Chris, what sorts of things have you been creating recently? And why?
So, I mean, I'm one of these people that has been, I feel like there's not enough time to do all the different things that I want to do. So I always have a whole bunch of plates spinning at the same time. In the most recent history, I've been working on poetry. I've always fancied myself a poet, but I'm a very slow poet. So, you know, it seems like I write a poem a couple times a year. So like my oeuvre of poetry is not very large. But yeah, you know, I think with poetry, for me, if you talk about like if we're answering directly the question of why we create, like there's all these different reasons. For poetry, it's just my sheer delight with words, right? Like it's just knowing words, putting words together, what they look like on the page, what the words mean, what they mean, how the meaning changes when you put them next to each other, like what do they sound like, the alliteration, like everything having to do with language is just sort of a pure delight with me. Like that extends beyond poetry, like listening to people talk, like hearing their little verbal tics, and then going down and like taking notes about those things. So, you know, so in that case, there's just like, I just enjoy words in general. And I think poetry is sort of like one of the purest expression of just making sure to no more, no less than the perfect set of words and the perfect order of words. But in a larger sense, I mean, like if we're talking about like why we create in this big, like I feel like this is a very existential question for me. Like I, you know, there's all these things that a human can do. You know, when you get up, you like put on your clothes and you brush your teeth and you do all these kind of like self-sustaining, keep yourself alive, keep your family alive stuff. But like one of the, you know, like why am I here questions, like I'm not a religious person. So I don't believe I'm here for religious reasons. I believe in like science and chaos. Like, so it's like, you know, in that sense, there's no reason that we're here. It's very sort of darkly, the dark side of existentialism or whatever. But I do think that I'm here to create stuff, right? Like I was blessed with this brain that has all this stuff in it. And that's another reason I create, by the way, is like to get it out of here. Like it seems like it's in here and it needs to come out. And so like it's you know, I think actually I brought up this page of like writers talking about why they create, why they write. And Lord Byron apparently said, if I don't write to empty my mind, I go mad. And so that's not, you know, I'm not saying I would go crazy, but like, it's just this strange phenomenon where like I come up with an idea. And since my job as a database developer, I created a little database called Creative Idea. And so like I'll just like put stuff in there. Like if I come up with an idea, I'm like, I can't work on this right now. So I'm gonna like put it in my database. And there's like 300 things in there. I'll never get to them all. It's like Hemingway's suitcase full of manuscript ideas that he lost. But mine's in Dropbox. So I'm not gonna lose that stuff.
So
Anyway,
what do
I mean,
you do
that's
with your poetry that is done? Or what have you done with your poetry that has written?
I mean, for years, mostly I've just been kind of like sitting on it. I'm one of those people that like, I like to work on stuff intensely for a while, then just kind of like set it aside and then I come back to it. Actually, but like a couple of years ago, I wrote a poem that I thought was good enough that I actually submitted it to the New Yorker. Um,
Mhm.
and then it like sat in their inbox for like 9 months and was rejected. But, like I feel like I've written enough and taken enough care with it that I'm like I think this is actually. I guess the problem
Yeah.
with that is that I'm not, for better or worse, I'm going to submit this to Johnny's Apple and Lamps West Louisiana Review. Like I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't want to be in like a magazine with the readership of like the people who edit the magazine. Like I'm aiming right for
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
top. So
Yep.
for better or worse or whatever. But I mean, eventually, like I
Yep.
feel like eventually I'm not going to be like Billy Collins famous from poetry or whatever, but I would love to have my own sort of life's work of like my own leaves of grass, right? Like my kind of life's work in one little book of
Hmm.
like Chris's poems, and then like my kids will have that to puzzle
Right.
over from then on.
Well,
Yeah.
were you ever one for like open mic night poetry reading? Like coffee shop that or is not that kind of poetry?
It's it doesn't my poetry I think doesn't lend itself to open mics. Like I have gone actually, so like um a board member for the local county arts council for about 3 years, and just before the pandemic,
Mhm.
my tenure ended. But during that period, the director of the county arts council came up with this idea, which was really cool, was to have each of the just the regular county commissioner meetings, which were they're talking about all kinds of like legal and county business and social and school funding and all that kind of boring stuff. But she wanted to start out each meeting with like some creative artist in the county doing a little reading. So like a little
Oh.
1 to 6 minute reading, sort of an invocation
That's great.
at the start. Um, and I actually like got the cojones to like sign up to do one of those. And this poem
Oh
that I sent to
wow.
the New Yorker, I went and read that poem. Um, which is it's just like the weirdest thing. I'll have to send a link. There's a link to it on they record all of the county meetings or something, so you can like see me reading this poem. But it's just a weird experience for me because it's like a poem about the moment I found out a friend had drowned when I was a kid. So I was like,
Oh
it's like a heavy topic, and I'm standing up in front of people. Like
yeah.
there's like a line of people behind me waiting to like come shake their fingers at the county board about like bulldozing the trailer home park to put up expensive condos and stuff. So it seems very out of place, but also very in place. Like, thank goodness
Yes.
we had that. Um, but the reason I say it probably isn't is because it's like carefully crafted poetry shape and like stanzas and stuff like that, and you kind of lose that when you're reading it out loud. At least for my stuff, it's not like jammy
Yeah.
kind of poetry. But anyway. But what about you, Nick? I've been waiting for this for a long time because like it seems like in the last year, especially, like you've just
It's
become this
exploded, Nick.
like mayor of making.
Well, it's
Exactly.
and it was weird. So since I proposed the topic to an email just a few days ago, I've just really thinking about it. It was like, okay, why do I make the things that I make? And it's really two answers that very much play into each other. And one of them is that I absolutely love to learn. And the way that I learn best is if I am doing something and creating something. So
Yep. Yep.
I was given piano lessons as a young kid and had no desire to play piano. So I took probably 3 years of lessons and probably progressed the equivalent of someone who played for 6 months. But later on, middle school came around and, I heard a song that had a really cool guitar riff. I'm like, I want to play guitar. And I picked a hard song that was well beyond anything I could have possibly played. And then I just sat there and I listened and I got tabs and there wasn't really YouTube at that point and there wasn't really any sort of that, but I got whatever help I could. And hours and hours and hours and hours of practicing later, I could play the song pretty poorly, but I could play it. And so much of what I have learned to create is purely just because I saw someone else do something and it seemed really neat. And I wanted to go on that journey of learning that. Mostly because I love understanding how the world works and being able to do it. I can at least say, okay, I may not be the best guitarist. I'll never be the best guitarist, but I can play most of that song and I at least understand how finger tapping works and all this. So I can appreciate the high levels of art while also being able to boast a little bit and say, hey, I can play that song. And the other aspect is, and this one, I don't know, it felt like one of those therapy aha moments when I kind of realized. I have always been, I guess, insecure, sort of, about who I am, and I've always wanted affirmation. That's probably a better way. So by me being able to write and being able to create something and being able to edit, and I used to do a lot of writing when I was younger. I did a little bit of poetry, a lot of short stories, things like that, but almost everything would be published. I mean, I wrote a blog back before WordPress where I would literally hand edit HTML and write in my new blog post.
Oh, wow.
So I've been blogging for a very long time. And the goal was always to get affirmation. And it wasn't like I needed a million views, and I would have always loved that, but I needed one person to read what I wrote and say that was good. That was always what I need. I needed that one. And I realized that, looking back on my Twitter, if I make something and post a picture and don't get one retweet or one like, and it seems so silly, it almost hurts. It hurts my soul, even though I know it could just be timing, because so much of Twitter is timing and who sees it. Whereas I'll get a pic, I'll make something and then get 2 likes, and it's like, that's it. I'm good. I'm happy. 2 people like this, and I am validated. So much of what I create is about that validation.
So what you're saying now is I have to go back through your Twitter and make sure that you at least get 1 like for every one of the things you post. Thanks a lot, Nick. But no, I was actually going to bring. You go, Laura.
I just so much of it is about not wanting to be the only person in the world who's feeling that thing, right? So, I mean, validation is essentially that, right? You're not alone. A lot of us feel this way. A lot of us think about these things, and it's a way of being in the world sort of together, I think. Does that make sense?
No, it certainly does. And not everything I have written, in fact, a lot of things I've written are fiction. I tend to write fiction and nonfiction. My poetry back when I was younger was definitely very deep and emotional and all that. But most of the stuff I've written lately has not, it's purely fiction, characters obviously that are based on myself and life around. But I think it's more, I created something and therefore I have, metaphorically put my soul into it. But validate, because part of my soul is in that validation is awesome.
Yeah.
And it comes back and validates me, in a weird way. But that's also the scary thing about publishing, as the two of you know, and I don't know how many people listening know, but publishing is a long journey. And it's a very quiet and isolated one up front because you don't share your writing. No one is allowed to see it except your editor. And you're lucky if you either pay for an editor very heftily, or you have to get published before you write, which is something that most authors never get. So you're writing in complete isolation. You have to finish something, and then you have to convince some of the hardest possible people to give your work a chance and then potentially represent it. So you might find one person, one editor who will read it and say, fine, I'm willing to possibly represent this. And then they have to try and sell your book. And then you have to get it to someone who doesn't actually care if the text is good or not. They just care if it sells. And then even to get to that point is just so much ghosting and rejection. And, everyone's the stories. It's like, oh, Harry Potter got passed up 7 times. Every book gets passed up 7 times. Like, the only books that don't are from established authors like, Stephen King. If Stephen King wants to sell another book, he'll sell another book.
Right.
So, like, that has thrown me so far away from wanting to almost complete or push for any of my writing projects. And that's, I think, why I've gotten into making is I can make something very quickly. I can throw it up on Twitter very quickly. I can get, again, 1 or 2 likes. That's all I need. I don't, and then I can sell it on Etsy and get a positive review. And, like, there's nothing better than, one, not having to pay for it, getting paid to create, and then at the end of the day, getting a 5-star review because the person likes your art. So it is definitely, significantly more addicting and significantly more rewarding than a 1-year path of writing this crazy novel at the dice roll of hoping that you're going to be put on shelves.
Yeah.
When you make stuff like the Mad Eye, Moody Eye, and then people buy that or whatever, like, do you think of yourself as an artist in that? Because when I see those, I'm like, there's definitely some artistry that goes into this. Like, is it technology? Is it art? Is it a combination?
So that specific piece, I certainly felt like an artist at first. Now it is an assembly line. So when someone buys one, it is press print on the 3D printer. It is go through my list of belts that I have purchased, find the right one for the customer based off of their color preference, things like that. Snip it up, solder some joints, plug everything in, make sure everything works, package it up, ship it off. So there's no creativity. There's no art anymore in that specific piece. It's the only piece that I, do that way, and it's just because it's successful, and I'm not going to say no. But and that's the thing I've struggled with a little bit with my other pieces is I grew up in a family that is artsy. My mother can paint wonderful, realistic art in lots of different mediums. My father was very good at woodworking, and he was not as quite as artsy. My sister was a wonderful clay worker. She could do all sorts of things on a spinning wheel, and she's done a lot of art in her life. And I always kind of felt like the one who had to try really hard to make something that was passably good. Like, I'd make the refrigerator door, but I wasn't going to win any contests. So artist was never a label I put on myself. So to be creating art now, it's kind of weird, and I'm like, maybe I am a passable artist. It's just a weird label.
I guess part of what I was getting to maybe is like part of what I hear you saying, and I think a lot of why I create is the same, which is connecting with others, like however that's defined, whatever that audience of that piece of art is. Like, I think it's important to connect with others, and part of what you're talking about with the getting a Twitter like is like an affirmation, but also a connection. And so I was just wondering, like, is the affirmation you get from a Twitter like the same as you just sold something on Etsy email? Like, is that the same? Is it different? How is it different? One's sort of more transactional, money wise, and the other one is maybe more of a direct "you are good" button.
I would say they're in the similar family. Obviously, getting a sale is, it's one thing to walk by. So I've done, a few craft fairs. It's one thing to walk by and be like, ooh, that's cool looking. I get that, pretty much everybody who stops by says some piece of mine. Ooh, that's cool. That's a neat idea. Like, they appreciate that, but then they just walk on. Someone who's willing to pull out money and pay for something is not only am I willing to say it's cool, I really think it's cool and it's worth my time and money. So obviously that is, significantly more for me. I think, and especially I think this also reaffirms the maker aspect of it. The maker community, I love participating in. And I think there's a very different side of that is different than the affirmation. So at least, there's a joke that LED Twitter is the best Twitter because anyone who's just sharing their like crazy inventions and things that they make with LEDs, like it's just very positive. Like 90% of the people who comment are just all super positive. And so I think there's that aspect of it. And I love in that way just cheering other people on. Like I don't go in other people's threads and be like, well, oh, you made this, but I made this and it's better. Like I'm not about that. And I love that aspect of community and engaging with people that way. But what I create and that like desire for that like definitely is more the affirmation and less. I guess it does come back to connecting with people. But I think it's a little more primal of just kind of needing that affirmation.
Yep.
What about for you, Laura? Like, do you feel like you make either the writing or the knitting for this kind of affirmation or whatever? Or like, how does it feel different if you get like feedback from writing versus like every time I tell you, I still love my scarf? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I've been making this scarf. And it's interesting. There are different reasons behind creation, and I think that's a very good bifurcation, right? Like I just like the joy of the feel of the fiber and the needles, because needles, of course, are different sizes, different shapes, depending on what you're creating. What do I want to hold today? Do I want to hold this sort of scratchy wool, which can be comforting in its own way, or am I more in a silk mood? And it's kind of visceral like that. That's what the knitting is for me. The writing is very, very different. And with that, I would say there's more of a hope of affirmation attached to that. Not 100%, because a lot of the affirmation I get is, oh yeah, I think I expressed this in a way that helps me make sense of, the nonsense swirling around me, whether that's through fiction or nonfiction. But, the affirmation on that is just amazing because it's like, hey, you're not the only one having these kinds of crazy thoughts. Other people are feeling the same way. And so that's much more of an affirmative act for me.
Yeah. I'm always like fascinated when you think about the different kinds of art and how the artist connects differently with the reader or the viewer or the recipient of the art, right? Like for like a painting, right? It can take months or years to create a painting, and then the audience like takes it all in at once, and it's usually like 20 seconds, and then they move on. If it's a book, like the author can take months or years to write the book, and then it can take months or whatever for the reader to like go through the journey of experiencing the art slowly over quite a period of time. But then they're done, and then they move on. Like a song is something you can literally hear and like feel on your body, and it's also like like it take months to make it, but only 3 minutes to experience. Something like a scarf is something that maybe took you weeks to make. And then the recipient, like they can experience it for the rest of their life, right? Like every time they wrap that around, every time I wrap my scarf around my neck, I think of you. Like it's not, maybe that sounds a little cheesy, but like, and the art doesn't change, but it's like I'm connecting some DAWs to my neck. Like I'm connecting, like sort of literally, right? You had this thing in your hands for weeks, and I don't mean this in a creepy way. I just mean it
No,
Like, we're friends, right? Like, this is something you made. You
yes.
spent a few weeks. You probably weren't thinking actively of Chris. Every,
No, I actually was in that case.
aw.
In that case, I was.
I mean, that makes it even more special, right? And like, that's, in the case of knitting, it's kind of interesting because, like, if you do a painting and whatever, like, and it's in a museum, like, you don't really know who the audience is, but for each piece you do, you have an audience of
Yeah,
one. I mean, at least for the stuff you sort of make
exactly.
for a particular person, it's just kind of interesting.
Yep, it's true. It's true.
But
Yeah.
yeah, um, some
And
of the stuff. I mean, it's. Oh, you go ahead, Nick.
but yeah, and I was gonna say with you, Chris, as I'm hearing, most of what you create, you don't make public immediately, or don't make or haven't made public at all.
Well, that's just some of the poetry. I mean, like, I edited a book about J.D. Salinger years ago, um, and that was one of the cases where, like, it's certainly, like, the whole thing is about connecting, right? It's called Letters to J.D. Salinger. It's basically this big collective letter from hundreds of writers and fans and um, scholars who, like, all write a letter to J.D. Salinger, and we kind of package them all up into this one book, which is just like one big book of letters. Um, And so, like, that was my way of saying, well, I'm never going to actually meet JD Salinger, and, like, he would never read my letter if I mailed him one or whatever. But, like, I'm gonna make and he doesn't want to receive the letters anyway. So this is more of a way to not really connect with him, but connect with all the other fans who want to connect with somebody. Um,
Hmm.
and so there was partly that kind of wanting to connect to other readers who are touched by his work. But there was also this, like, feeling that, um, like, there's something that needs to exist in the world that does not. And so I guess it's my job to create this thing. um, I feel like a lot of writers feel that way. Like, on this page that I brought up about writers' quotes about why they write, it seemed like Joan Didion was one of these people where she was like, I would look at the world and I wouldn't understand things about, like, why is this happening? So I would need to go investigate. Why is
Hmm.
this thing happening in the world? And then, like, write it all down so that everyone else could also understand. And then we would all understand better. Um, so yeah, creating things that I think I need to create because they don't exist, and then hoping after the fact that other people will also agree that that was something that needed to be in the world. So yeah, a little bit of private, a little bit of public, but yeah, the idea of creating because I want, you know, like, when the Salinger book came out, it didn't, sell. It probably sold, like, I don't know, probably 2,000, 3,000 copies in the whole, since it came out in 2000 or whenever that was, ages and ages ago. Um, and it got a lot of great reviews in a lot of big newspapers. Remember those? Um, and
Yes.
it's weird that, like, I did not make a lot. I didn't make much money off of it, and, like, I didn't become a famous writer because of it. But one of the things that even to this day kind of gasses me up about it the most is that just because of the kind of book it was, I guess, like, almost all of those 3,000 copies are in, like, academic libraries around the whole world. It's like if you go to almost any, like, school library or something, because it's like it's been used in, like, author reader response theory. Like, people have used it in their papers and stuff like that. So it's like a book that a university library would have. So if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, like, it's kind of cool, I guess, that, like, proof that I existed or something exists in all these libraries. Um, and the idea of something I created being in a library, since I adore libraries so much, is just kind
Hmm.
of the best part. I don't know.
Let's hope
Do
you don't
either of
get
you
hit.
feel like that, like, something that will, like, what's the quote from Hamilton about something? I want to do something that's gonna outlive me or whatever. Like, is that something that compels either
Yeah.
of you? Like, after I die, there's still gonna be this scarf around Chris's neck, or there's gonna be people wearing a Mad Eye Moody Eye. What do you guys feel about that?
That used to be much more. of an impetus for me when I was a lot younger. And it's not so much anymore. I don't feel like I need to make my mark in that way. But who knows? I mean, it could come back. You know? That's the kind of feeling that comes and goes.
Yeah. What about you, Nick?
I don't think I've viewed any of my writing or anything as being long term. Like I think back to one project which I kind of wish I had the motivation to finish, because I think it was a good idea, but it's clearly fiction, but it's nonfiction in the sense that it is an allegory that explains how the internet works. From the perspective of sort of like it's sort of like the Matrix, in that, you know, someone thinks they're in the real world and then they get transported into another world, but that other world works like the internet. So the taxi cab is packets that you get transferred around. So it talks about the insanity of being bumped around, and there is no one direct straight line. It's up, there's a little bit of traffic, so let's reroute miles in a different direction because it really doesn't matter because it's all the speed of light. And I thought it was witty in the sense that it would explain a lot of very complicated topics, and I think giving an appreciation for both how the internet works on a like physical level, and then also juxtaposing with society, which was the browser languages. So you had JavaScript that controlled everything. You had HTML and CSS, which was who you were. So everyone was a tag, but they could have different classes and names and things like that. So I thought there was a lot of potential in that, but even running that, I'm like, this has a half-life of 15 years maybe. So it's like this will never be Flatland or Lineland or things like that. This will be a book that maybe gets written in class, read in classes and understood, and then at some point just gets ignored in the annals of time. But it's always, I always try and write something that is useful now.
But I think that it's okay to have something that has like a limited shelf life. If it's something that gasses you up, that's something that gets you to roll out of bed or whatever. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong for setting aside because, I don't know, CSS3 is going to be old news or whatever. Like, this is a little bit different than a tech book. Like, when you were describing that, I'm like, this would be like an amazing, like, DK junior reader intro to the internet kind of a book, right? Like a very visual, because it is very abstract, right? Like, and kids, I think nowadays my kids certainly probably think of the internet as very much a magic black box, right? And they're just like, I don't think about how it works. I just know that I'm tapping the tapper and like my video is not coming up. Dad, why is my video? And get understanding the underpinnings of it. I think. Like, how is the sausage made? I think that'd be very interesting and useful. I mean, not just with the internet, right? So I encourage you to consider doing that anyway.
Maybe. Again, it's that publishing thing. Like, I will spend, if I were to finish it, I think I got like 3 or 4 chapters in. If I were to actually finish it, it would be months of effort. And then months of effort trying to ship it and sell it. And even though there is Lineland and Flatland and all that, like I don't think I don't think those are the best sellers that people are looking to buy right now.
One thing that's interesting, I think, is that on this meeting here with these folks, this folks. I'm trying to see where we're going to show up on the picture. None of us are saying like I create because I want to put food on the table, right? Like, all of us have day jobs with salaries and stuff, and we're sort of like, I don't know if like it adds diminishment to say we're like creative on the side or like creative as a hobby, but it's not our main gig. We're not paying the rent with the art, and like so many great artists, like on this list of people quoting about why I create, like that was their way to that was their career. That was their. So it's interesting that like, yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but like for a lot of people, that is like I'm creating because that's the only thing I know how to do. And is it different if you're just creating as a hobby? I don't know. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's
But
certainly different. I mean, if your motivation is you have to eat, you're going to,
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to push through those hard times. You're going to try and make things that just little piece better because you have to.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been interesting. Like because of the Salinger book, I ended up making like or partly making that feature length Salinger documentary too.
Right.
And I
Right.
remember telling him because he didn't like pay me all that much to actually make that, but I kept saying the whole time, it took years, like I don't want to help you create this because I want to like money or fame or notoriety or any of that stuff. Like I'm doing this because of excellence, or like I'm doing this because I want the product to be excellent. Like I want to tell an excellent story um, about Salinger. Um, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but like my motivation in that, in anything, in a poem, in something I draw, in a book that I want to write, like my first priority is like ending up with excellence. Like that's the reason I'm here, to create something I'm proud that exists. And then if people read it, if people look at it, people buy it, if it outlasts my life, like those are all secondary to me
Right.
anyway. Like the idea that I can be a vessel through which art comes into being is it's the meaning of life for me. Laura, you have
I
having deep
wonder.
thoughts.
Yeah.
I am. Well, not necessarily, but there's that saying. If you do what you love for a living, you'll never work in it.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes that it can be the opposite, right? So I also do a lot of cooking, or I did. When I had more people living in my house,
Yeah.
and I would always, are you starting a restaurant? Would you like to start a restaurant? Would you like to cook for a living? And there was a point where I had to cook for a living because it was at the time the only way I was going to be able to pay my rent, and put food on the table for my kids. And I can tell you, it's a very different proposition when you're doing it for money than when you're doing it for your own personal enjoyment. So there's that aspect to consider too. There obviously there are people. There are many famous chefs, but they've gotten to that point in their lives where they can create and get paid for it, and it still feels somewhat luxurious. But they spent lots of time, as a line cook, or what have you, sweating away in the kitchen before they got to this sort of artistic level where they could do this essentially for fun, but also get paid for it. And I feel like the same is true of, with writing, it's a little bit different because, yes, you can make a living as a writer without necessarily being an artist, but that is not a fun kind of writing to do.
Yeah, technical writing maybe.
Done that. Yeah,
copy editing,
or even writing for trade publications. So there are lots of trade publications out there, Carpet Tack Monthly or whatever, whatever your business is, there's a trade publication for it. And there's probably a lot of people writing for it who, would really rather be writing about something else.
Yeah. There's a documentary that just came out about Anthony Bourdain called Roadrunner that I very much want to see.
Yes.
And I looked at the trailer, and his life is sort of textbook, sort of what you were just talking about, right? Like he spent
Right.
decades just in the sweaty kitchens of New York, as a
Yep.
line cook and as a this, and then like spending summers up in Cape Cod, being a chef for somebody and sleeping on somebody's couch, and spent 30 years doing that. And then, only very late in life did he have like greatness thrust upon him, to quote Twelfth Night, right?
Exactly.
And it
Yes.
became a very different thing, right? Like I don't know. Yeah, that's just what came to mind. It seemed
Yeah.
like it
Yep.
seemed like it being thrust upon him didn't quite work in the end.
I mean,
him.
early on, I had some very, I guess, liberal teachers, I guess might be a good way of putting it, who are very much anti-American exceptionalism. So, when we would teach about Thomas Edison in school, they would follow it up with Thomas Edison would often, troll the patent office, and because he worked there, and he would take other people's ideas. And let's also keep in mind, most of his greatest inventions were done when he had a lab and he had 36 research assistants and yada yada. And he would, and it was never Thomas Edison isn't a man who created great things and history would have been better without him. It's that he alone did not do this, and there's a whole lot of work and effort by other people that gets completely ignored. And I think that kind of hit home for me was, if I want to be a creative, I need to do all of this crazy work, because at the end of the day, as wonderful as art is, it is not a need to survive. You do not need, you need food. You need water, you need shelter, and all these things. And art, it just happens to be a luxury. And
I would agree with that, but it's a pretty grim life without it.
Oh, I completely agree.
Right?
But at the end of the day, if I have $5, only $5 to spend that day, and I can buy myself lunch, or I can buy myself something to hang on the wall, I'm going to buy myself lunch.
Yeah.
So
right.
At the end of the day, I realize that I have to be amazing. I have to be, I either have to target the rich, or I have to, be better than food, or do something that helps people put food on the table. Because if you can get people to that point, so that's why I chose business and things like that, was I know I could still create on the side. But with a book, unless I write a book on how to get rich quick, which we know those sell, but not exactly my thing. It could be a very difficult, and there's also a whole lot of competition. And it's competition for a luxury. So you can pick 5 winners out of 1 million, and it's okay. Whereas if you want to open up a pizza joint, as long as there's not a pizza joint right down the block, you might actually still make some sales. Like there's still local competition. Like there's a lot more, possible entrants, because people still need food. And hey, Starbucks across from Starbucks still sells Starbucks.
Yep.
I would slightly disagree with you here and say that,
okay,
at least for me, I think societally, like this creating art is necessary. Like it is something like it's again, it like comes back to this reason of like, why are we here, right? Like peaches survive, kangaroos survive, but like we have this giant, foldy thing in our head that we've evolved to have, and like, why is it there? That's one of the reasons we're here. And then I would also say, like, how do we know about the people who lived lived near the caves in France, if not for the paintings they painted on the wall? How would we know about the Battle of Troy if not for Homer and his descendants? How would we know about the history of war if not for Herodotus? Like, how are we, not to say that we're good at this necessarily, learning from history and not repeating the bad part, but
we learn the wrong way. War worked really well. We do. Okay, good.
We do learn from the history of art, and we do like thrust ourselves forward and, maybe evolve for the better and maybe transcend what we were before, largely because of the paintings and the stories and the music we've created. This is an expression always of our history, in the art, as well as just the straight bland history, right? Like it's also expressed um, in the things that we create as snapshots of those moments in time, right? So there you have it, fella.
This really great children's book by Leo Leone called Frederick, and
yeah,
it's
Frederick.
about it's about this community of mice, and they're getting ready for the winter, and they're all kind of scurrying around and stashing up food and everything, except for this one mouse named Frederick, who is just kind of like taking everything all in. He's looking at the fields. He's sort of a dreamer type. And all the other mice are like, Frederick, come on, get to work. We've got to prepare for the winter. And then the winter comes, and they have all the food and everything that they need to get through the winter. But Frederick is the one who tells them stories of, the spring and the summer, and essentially kind of keeps life from getting too grim during the winter with the hope and promise of what is to come. And just his artistic storytelling, poetic nature. And they finally realize, oh, this is what Frederick provides for us. It's just as important as, as the food and the shelter.
Until next season, when everyone wants to be Frederick and nobody gets the things, and everyone thinks they can compete and be the great storyteller. I'm joking. I'm just being silly.
The other thing
what they're good at.
The other thing that story emphasizes is, or I think underscores what I was just saying. Like, think of our Zoom life through the pandemic, right? Like we all could like have food delivered, and we all could like drink water from the tap, and we all could like order new pants from Target when our bellies got too big and all that kind of stuff. But how did we connect? How did we connect?
Right.
We co-watched Netflix with each other. We
exactly.
did meetups and did like online video board games like we did. Like a lot of it was focused on consuming art, right? And like that helped us survive. Like it did. Like we had been sitting by ourselves. I'm not trying to like hit everything you said, Nick, over the head and be like, no, you are wrong.
No, but I totally agree. I think it's that isolation and the fear and the uncertainty and the holy crap. None of us on this earth have been through anything remotely like this ever, and we don't know what to do. And in those moments, you really, when you want to reach out to other people, hey, maybe we don't know what to do, but we're together and we can figure it out.
And like explain what's going on to each other, right? Like the watching some story and talking about it and talking about the light at the end of the tunnel of the pandemic, even if it's through fiction or whatever. Like that's the same exact impulse for like, why did the ancient Greeks invent Apollo? To explain like, don't be afraid when the sun goes down, because Apollo's chariot's bringing it on the other side in the morning, right? So like they're collectively trying to explain their world and connect over their fears of the unknown.
Yep. And I will say this brings me back to Ted Lasso. It came out in the middle of all of this, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And it was like a balm. And if you look back at the reviews of the show and the timing when it dropped and all of that, it was just like it was a little spark of warmth and humanity and a reminder of what's good about us. Because outside, I don't know about you guys, but outside, there were people spitting in the grocery stores. There were, there was absolutely no hope that anybody in the administration was going to do anything about this. It was a terrifying time.
Yeah.
And human nature was in many ways not at its best. And then this piece, like a poem from Frederick, came in the middle of all this misery, and it was just, oh wow, yeah, humans can be good. Maybe there's hope.
And on that comment, I there's clearly more to be said, but we're a little past an hour at this point.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
So
I have a meeting at 9:30.
Yes, I'll make sure you can make that. So we'll skip giving back for now, just to again be able to end on time.
Yeah.
So thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed today's show. This will be up on YouTube later, as well as the podcasts, and we will see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Laura. Any final ending statements?
Thank you, Nick, for being the host of this and creating this platform where 3 very good friends can get together and talk about what's on our minds.
You're welcome.
And I'll close out with saying, everyone listening, create whatever that means for you. Create.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye. See you next time.